I had a feeling that something was wrong with my wife, Caroline. It was a small feeling, but enough for someone who had known her for 12 years, 10 of which we had been married. Caroline and I have a typical Scandinavian family with 2 children, a 7-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl. We live in our own house not far from the district capital, and we both work full-time. Caroline at the town hall, and I work at a small consulting company. My wife and I met at an evening class on advanced Microsoft Excel usage and got married 2 years later. Of course, like most others, our marriage had its ups and downs, but there were never any serious problems, at least from my point of view. The first signs appeared about a month after our 10th anniversary. It was a slight decrease in her interest in sex. Not that she refused me, but she started suggesting quickies much more often than making love, much more frequently than before. Another subtle but noticeable sign was her increased spending on clothes. Another sign was that she started criticizing me more and more without any real reason. Caroline always spent at least 2 evenings a week with her friends doing various harmless activities like aerobics, evening classes, bowling, and badminton. But she only had a couple of late nights out a year with the girls at a bar or restaurant when someone in the group wanted to celebrate something. I did everything I could but couldn't find any new or strange patterns in her evenings out. My colleague Eric noticed that I was having problems in my marriage and told me that it was better to find out the truth than to keep feeling as miserable as I was. I told him that a private detective could probably uncover the truth, but I couldn't hire one for 2 very simple reasons. First, there wasn't one, at least not in the phone book, in our town, or the entire district. Second, even if there was, I didn't have the money to keep Caroline under surveillance for an extended period. But I promised to do everything possible to resolve the issues between Caroline and me. The last straw that broke the camel's back happened on the first Saturday evening after Eric suggested I take some action. Caroline and I were invited to a pleasant dinner hosted by friends not far from the city, where she behaved like a loving wife all evening. She even kept it up all the way home in the taxi, which we shared with another couple. Naturally, I hoped to continue the pleasant evening by making love to her. But as soon as the babysitter left our house, Caroline stopped being so sweet and snapped at me. "Forget about it if you were foolish enough to expect anything from me tonight." I gave up my attempts and replied with a beaming smile. What could I expect from an icy, frigid witch? Nothing more was said that evening, but it took me several hours before I fell asleep. I used that time to come up with a simple plan. The only thing I needed to do was subscribe to an anonymous internet service so I could send emails without being traced. After testing the email service on Sunday morning, I sent Caroline the following email at her workplace on Monday. "Dear Mrs. Ekman, to my great disappointment, I have obtained evidence of your infidelity, which makes me feel sorry for your husband and envious of your lover for the pleasures he enjoys with such a magnificent woman as you. Of course, I am strongly tempted to share this information with your husband, but I have a better proposal, as I want and need to have a good time with a wonderful woman like you during my next business trip. Therefore, I expect you to be sitting alone at the Plaza Cafe today, Monday, between 2:30 p.m. and 3 p.m. with €600 in an envelope on the table. My associate will greet you with the words, 'Aren't you Lars' sister?' You should respond, 'No, I'm his wife.' After that, you must hand him the envelope. Thank you for your very kind cooperation. Your true friend." €600 is a very modest amount, which cannot be considered serious blackmail if she goes to the police, and they are unlikely to treat it as a priority case to save the reputation of a cheating wife. On the other hand, it was a small enough amount for Caroline to easily withdraw from an ATM. Both euros and our own krona are available from ATMs outside the main office of our bank. That Monday, I suggested to Eric that we take a 3-hour coffee break at the Plaza Cafe. We entered a few minutes before 3, and to my feigned surprise, I saw Caroline sitting alone at a table. Then, to my genuine surprise, I saw Martin Jensen sitting alone a few tables away from her. That bastard Martin also works at the town hall, and he's married to one of Caroline's best friends. We had dinner with him and his wife last Saturday, but I didn't notice anything unusual between him and Caroline. Staring at Caroline and Martin, I loudly shouted, "What the hell is going on here? Why are you two here instead of working? Why don't you sit at the same table?" Martin ran off without saying a word to me, and Caroline silently left the cafe right after him. Eric was even more confused than I was when I told him that we had probably caught Caroline with her lover. After that, I called Martin's wife, Cecilia, and asked her if she had any idea why my wife and her husband took the afternoon off and were sitting at different tables in a cafe. Then I told her that I suspected Caroline was having an affair, and now Martin must be the prime suspect unless I receive a very good explanation of what they were involved in. She promised to have a serious talk with Martin and call me back once she found out something. Martin was a very handsome man, usually well-dressed, polite, with good manners, and a real party lover. Of course, those of us who knew him from childhood had a very different opinion of him. At home, I checked our bank account, where it showed that 600 euros had been withdrawn and then deposited back during the day. For the moment, that was enough information for me, so I filled out the divorce papers that I had picked up at the courthouse during my lunch break. When Caroline came home, she was as angry as a hornet and lashed out at me. "You acted like an idiot at the cafe. I can explain everything if you just take the time to listen to me." I replied, "No, I don't want to listen because I don't care about your explanations. Just read these divorce papers and sign them. Everything is split 50-50, and you won't get a better deal, even with a lawyer, who would cost you a fortune." It was clear that she was truly furious, and she shouted at me, "These divorce papers are the only reasonable thing you've managed to do in a long time." Boiling with anger, she signed the divorce papers without reading them and yelled, "It will be a great relief to finally get a real man instead of a worthless loser like you." And that's how my marriage ended. Caroline left the house, and I didn't care where she went. Later, I received a call from a sobbing Cecilia, who told me that Martin had confessed to having an affair with Caroline. Now he was crying and begging her to forgive him. She said she didn't know what to do and had demanded that Martin move out and live with his parents for the next 2 weeks so she could have time to think about their future. I told her that Caroline and I had already signed the divorce papers. One thing was certain. If Caroline considered Martin her new dream man, she could forget about it. But it wasn't my place to tell her that. After the phone call, I moved all of Caroline's clothes to the guest room, which made her furious when she returned home. I couldn't resist the temptation to tell her that I had informed Cecilia about what I saw at the Plaza Cafe. This news didn't make her any happier. The next day, strange things happened. When Caroline came home after work, she surprised me by saying, "Dear Lars, I'm sorry, and I regret everything I said yesterday in my angry mood. I was stressed and said foolish things I didn't mean. Can you forgive me for that? You are and always will be my true love. No more resentment. We are adults, and people expect us to do everything we can to resolve our problems. Please tear up those silly divorce papers we signed yesterday in anger, and I promise to be a much better, loving wife. I will explain everything about yesterday." I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "The divorce papers are already in court, and I already know everything about Martin and your affair. Last night, after you left, Martin confessed his infidelity to Cecilia, who called and told me that your so-called real man was a crying weakling, begging for forgiveness, claiming that you were the deceitful adulteress who seduced him. Not exactly the real man you thought you were trading me for, is he?" Caroline sobbed and asked, gasping, "Cecilia told you about Martin and me?" "Yes, and that explains why our marriage has been loveless for some time now. I suspected your deceit, but I didn't have any real proof until Martin confessed to Cecilia." Caroline had a strange expression on her face when she said, "But how did you get me to sign the divorce papers hours before Cecilia told you about Martin's confession?" I had had enough last Saturday night, and during several sleepless hours, I decided that divorce was my only option. The decision to divorce was made long before that crying fool Martin confessed to your affair. I'm sorry, and I wish I could undo everything I did with Martin. Can you give me a second chance and forgive me?" "No, because I will never understand how you could prefer that scoundrel Martin over me and think of him as a real man. I will never forget how you humiliated me since you fell for him. But that pile of garbage will be yours once Cecilia is done with him. You probably didn't know that all their inherited stocks, savings, expensive house, and cars are Cecilia's private property. The only thing Martin owns is a damn pile of debt since he bankrupted his business. Now Martin will lose his fancy Rolex and BMW, if those toys impressed you. If you truly love that sniveling bastard, you'll have to support him and his expensive habits." She replied, "I made a terrible mistake and will never understand how I could have been so foolish as to be seduced and deceived by that slippery worm. I'd rather be alone for the rest of my life than have anything to do with him." Gossip from the town hall reported that Martin told Caroline to go to hell when she informed him about the signed divorce papers and suggested they become an official couple. That explains why, the day after signing the divorce papers, she begged me to forgive her and cancel the divorce. Martin successfully avoided me ever since he saw me at the cafe. Just 2 days after his confession, a doctor put him on sick leave due to stress and physical issues. As I expected, Cecilia filed for divorce after the 2-week break, and Martin never returned to his job at the town hall. After being on sick leave for several months, he left town for a new job. He and Caroline never saw or spoke to each other again. Caroline rented an apartment in a good neighborhood, but she had to wait 3 months before she could move in. We agreed that until then, she would stay in our guest room and that neither of us would start seeing anyone until our divorce was finalized. Despite the cold atmosphere in the house, the arrangement worked better than expected. Then, about 2 months after we filed for divorce, something very unexpected happened with Caroline. One Saturday evening, she asked me if I could promise to keep an important secret about her financial affairs. I promised, and she said, "You've probably heard that someone in our town won the lottery jackpot. I'm the winner. The jackpot is $3 million US. That's enough to solve all my problems. We're still married, which is why I have to ask if you want half of it." "Congratulations." "No, I don't want anything and don't expect anything from you. My only suggestion is that you set up funds for the children so they can pay for their education, buy cars and apartments when they grow up, and support them when they get married." She looked at me and said, "Are you sure you won't try to ask for anything?" "Yes. When we lived together, your love was all I needed. But I'm sure that once Martin hears about this, he'll be at your door in no time, begging for your forgiveness and asking to be with you again. He'll never find out because you're the only one I've told, and you promised to keep it a secret. Even though I didn't keep my promises to you, I'm convinced that you're better than I am and will keep yours." Nothing more was said on the matter, and everything went on as usual, except that Caroline was out of town the following Thursday and Friday. On Saturday, she asked me if we could have dinner together because she had something to tell me. I agreed. Our children were spending the night at a friend's house. The dinner was excellent, with my favorite food and great wine, so I started to expect some attempt to buy my love. I was curious about how much she thought my love was worth and how much she was willing to pay for it. During the delicious dessert, she said, "I did exactly as you suggested and set up funds for our children." I replied, "You're a good mother, and those funds will greatly benefit them when they grow up." Nothing more was said on the matter, and we continued with pleasant small talk about other everyday things. During coffee with cognac after the meal, as we comfortably settled on the living room couch, she said, "I'm sorry for being a foolish, cheap adulteress who destroyed our happy family by deceiving and humiliating the best man I've ever known. Today, I can't understand how or why I fell for Martin's advances and seduction. I deeply regret it and have spent many sleepless nights crying over how incredibly stupid I was. Of course, I know that money can't buy your love and forgiveness. However, we know that courts often order the offender to pay money to their victim as compensation for the pain and humiliation caused. But since no court in this country cares about what I did to you, I took matters into my own hands. I acted as both prosecutor and judge, and I've ruled that all the remaining lottery money, after setting up the funds for our children, is to be transferred to your personal account. What I've done cannot be undone." She handed me the bank receipts, and I was silent for a long time before I finally said, "Oh my God, what have you done? I can't take your money. I'll return it to you." She replied, "You don't need to return anything to me. The lawyers who arranged this said it's impossible because there are no conditions attached. The money is yours and only yours, and I can't and won't regret what I've done with it. I don't expect or ask for anything in return. I did what I should have done before I got caught in that foolish affair. What the hell could I do? My love wasn't for sale, but Caroline wasn't trying to buy it. There were no conditions, no request for forgiveness. She only spoke of compensation. She didn't even try to kiss me. Although I was in a bit of shock, I began to realize that her love for me was genuine. Caroline was a smart, beautiful woman and the mother of my children. I suspected, without a doubt, that she was still in love with me. Could I ever find a woman better than her? Probably not. Find even one woman equal to her? Not likely. Could I forgive her? I didn't know, but why not give it a serious try? I decided to do just that. I said, "Dear Caroline, we are still married and we need to talk to each other about the past and about the future. I think a conversation about the future is more appropriate after this delicious dinner. Don't you agree?" She replied, "Yes." I continued, "Divorce causes hellish pain, and now it's even more painful after realizing how much you truly love me and how deeply you regret your affair." She started to cry and sobbed. "I pray every night that one day you will forgive me and give me a second chance." I moved closer to Caroline, hugged her, and said, "We are still married. Should we seriously try to stay that way?" She looked me straight in the eyes and whispered, "Am I dreaming, or is this real?" "It's real because I hope you're still the same Caroline you were before Martin tainted you. I've missed that Caroline so much." She hugged me tightly and whispered, "You'll never regret this." That evening could only end one way, with intense, passionate lovemaking. That night, I did everything I could to give her the best sex she'd ever had, and she did the same for me. It felt like our wedding night all over again, and for a long time after that night, we behaved like newlyweds. We called off the divorce, our relationship improved, and now we're a happy family again. Our children made Caroline and me promise that we would never try to divorce again. We rarely talk about Caroline's affair with Martin. For some reason, I'm not really concerned with any of the details. Even though she gave me all her money, I never felt like she was buying me back because there were no conditions attached, just a faint hope. She risked everything she had, won what she wanted, and only time will tell if she made the right choice. The truth is, I missed her so much that I probably would have done something to get her back, even without the money. One thing is certain, I love Caroline and she loves me. Thank you for listening until the end.